Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Ground Up Show. My name's Matt Diavella, and my guest today has been featured on Ellen, The Today Show, and Fast Company. He's the professional football player turned podcaster and author. His name is Lewis Howes. On the show, Lewis and I talk about why you need to live with a sense of urgency. He discusses getting clear on your vision and the questions you should be asking yourself, especially when you're stuck. We also probably spend a little bit too much time talking about our mutual admiration and respect for Dwayne The Rock Johnson, as well as our ambition to get the man himself on each of our podcasts. And speaking of The Rock, you guys are amazing. Last week, I announced a competition, the Get The Rock on Matt's podcast jingle competition, trademark, all rights reserved. And you've started to send in your 5 to 7 second jingles, and they are incredible. So essentially, every great journey needs a great jingle. Everybody knows that. That's obvious. I shouldn't even need to say it. So you guys have created this jingle that will potentially play every time I mention The Rock on this podcast. If this is the first episode you're listening to, you're probably ridiculously confused. But basically, for the past year and a half, I've been trying to get The Rock on my podcast. I've been tweeting at him. He's tweeted back twice. It's been an amazing journey. You can go to gettherockonmattspodcast.com to really get the full scope and all the details. Suffice to say, it's not over yet. It's not even close. So I need a jingle to help carry me through. So every time, it's a nice little button. It's a nice little punch every time we can bring up The Rock on the podcast, which is quite often, we will play the winning jingle. So I'm going to also go through a lot of these jingles on the show. I'm going to start sharing them with you guys, and I'm going to pick a winner in about 2 to 3 weeks. I haven't decided exactly when I'm going to close this just because it's so much fun. But if you follow me on YouTube or on the podcast, you will know when the winning submissions are being selected and when the entry to the competition will be closed. All right, so enough about that. Let's get into this week's podcast. This is the one and only Lewis Howes. Is it, I find myself doing this a lot, talking about podcasts on a podcast.
Yep.
Do you think listeners care?
I'm not sure. I don't think I've ever done an episode just on podcasting,
Right.
But with other podcasters, I've started out talking about it. Maybe they do. I don't know. No idea.
Yeah. I find it interesting.
I do too. No one's messaged me and been like, that was amazing when you guys were talking about podcasting. No one ever said that. So
That's true. I haven't heard that either. Maybe it's for a specific audience, but I do like I think people do like the behind the scenes stuff,
Yeah,
and they like to
so.
see like what actually goes into making this. Cause
I think so too.
You see the polished product, you see the final video or the final podcast, and everything seems obvious.
Right.
But then if you were to take a step back,
But I don't see your janky like hacks on all your cameras and to make sure that everything's good. Yeah.
yeah, and they don't see all the stress that leads up to a shoot and all the things that do go wrong along the way.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to do a little bit, is kind of break down some of that. So talking about the podcast itself I like it. It kind of helps. You've been doing this for a while. This is something you've been in for. I actually look back at some of your early YouTube videos. I like to do some scouting,
Right.
and it's just really interesting the time that you started, 2000, before 2010, like 2008 maybe.
For what, podcasting or just in general?
Well, I was looking at some of the early
videos. I started. My first YouTube video, I believe, was in 2006 or 2007. Was a video I did. Yeah, it must have been 10 years ago, I guess, 11 years ago. It was a video I did when Soulja Boy came out with his popular song. I think he only had one big song. It's called Superman. I don't know if you remember this song. It was huge. And the dance video was like a big hit. And so I redid the video with 4 other white football player dudes that I was like coaching at the time. I was coaching wide receivers at a college, and I was like, let's do this and see if it can go viral or something. And it went viral. It got like picked up on some news feed, and yeah, they picked it up and shared it everywhere. I think it got like a few 100,000 views on my video right there. And I never really used YouTube that much until later. I started to do a few videos here and there in 2010 when I just started creating other content. But I picked it up 2.5 years ago more, where I started doing every week.
Yeah, it seemed like early on it was just interviews. Like you happened to be around some people that you found interesting, and then
flip out a phone or
at a conference. And it seems like from where you started, it's obviously grown a lot. But what attracted you to the idea of just like making content? Because now we hear about this every day. Everybody's talking about you got to make content. It's got to be consistent, this and that. And at that time, was it so obvious?
Yeah, back in 2008, Twitter was getting big, and I remember getting on Twitter and everyone talking about making content, like content is king back in 10 years ago. And I realized that was the way to build credibility, authority, and an audience. If I wasn't creating content, then what was I doing? Just replying to people or just watching people's stuff? So I knew if I wanted to build any type of authority in any space, that I needed to be a creator early on. And that was a lot of micro content back then. It wasn't like I was making films or long form podcasts, but I just knew I needed to create something. And I would go to all these social media events or conferences and just learn from guys like Gary Vaynerchuk 10 years ago. He was talking about this, or other experts. And in that process, I would just start like doing reviews. Like, here's what I learned at this conference from this person. Here's what I took away from this session that I went to. And I would kind of just do like cliff notes over videos. And that was and I'd get feedback. And the more I would do that, people would recognize who I was. They would start to follow me. And I said, let me figure out this content thing because it's working. And it's evolved in the last decade, yeah.
And it's a lot of work, too.
A lot of work, man.
And it's not exactly a direct relation to monetizing or making money. Obviously now we can do a podcast and put an advertisement on it, and that's one of the easiest ways. But for a lot of people starting out, making content and building an audience doesn't exactly relate to building a business.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's hard to build an audience, first off, when there's over 500,000 podcasts out there. So if no one's listening or watching, then you're not going to make any money. So you can create all the content you want, but if you're not differentiating yourself, it doesn't matter. Or if you don't already have a platform or a distribution network to get your content in front of, it's going to be really hard to make money. And I realized early on that content was hard to make. And that's why I said, let me do something different, which is interview. This is, 10 years ago, I was interviewing people randomly. But then as I started my podcast, I started interviewing more intentionally and learning how to interview, how to create content that I didn't have to come up with all the time. Because you're a filmmaker. It's a lot of work to develop an idea, massage the idea, storyboard it, shoot it, edit it, refine it, do all those things. To do that deep work on a specific piece of content, it takes a lot of energy and mind space. And you can't do that much of it quickly. But interviewing, you can do it extremely quickly. And you can get some great content out of someone else. But I don't have to create, a bullet point list of like a topic that I'm covering and the research and stories and examples. I can just ask good questions. And I think that's what's been key for me to be able to create, 600 plus episodes in 5+ years is through interviews, not from me just doing it.
I think the big part of getting interviews, and one of the hurdles that I found early on was like, who do you interview? And like, how do you land interviews, especially big interviews?
It's not easy, man.
I've
been doing this for years, and my podcast, is in some ways it's amazing how I positioned it because it's called the School of Greatness. In other ways, I can't go backwards with like quality of guests and content. So once I get one caliber of guest, I've got to get someone that's equally as good on that level or greater to continue to improve the School of Greatness. It's not called like the School of Pretty Good or the School of Average. It's like, how do we get to the next level? And so for me, that demands and requires a lot of me to continue to go out there and network and build relationships. There's some guests that I've been emailing and texting The Rock's publicist for almost 4 years now.
You see this?
There you go. Picture of The Rock.
I'm doing the same thing.
I didn't even see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been doing that for almost 4 years now because he's been one of the guys that I want to get on. Will Smith, The Rock. I've been working on those guys for a while. And it just takes time. It just takes time for a lot of these things. There's some guys that I spent, Rob Deerdeck, I was reaching out to his team for about a year and a half before I was able to get him on. And now we're good friends. I just went on his show Ridiculousness a couple of days ago as a guest. We've done business together. We've helped each other out. But that's the beauty of landing the inspiring guests, because you can start to build a relationship and do other things with them. And that's the way I look at my podcast. It was never a way to build a business. My podcast started as an idea to help improve my life and then share that wisdom with other people. And I realized that if I could connect with some of the most inspiring people in the world, share their content to a larger audience and help them achieve their goals, then everything I want's going to happen if I just serve other people. And that's kind of how it all started. Then as the audience grew, people said, hey, can you create a book? Can you create a course? Can you do an event? How can we learn more? Can you put together other stuff? Everything that I've created in the last 5 years has come because of what people have demanded from me on my podcast. It wasn't like I'm going to go write books and courses and host these big conferences. It's what my audience wanted, and I just gave it to them.
We'll talk about The Rock in a little bit.
That's funny you have that. That's the only photo you have in your entire apartment is The Rock.
It's the only frame photo for sure.
That's
actually,
hilarious.
I got big news. This is probably going to come out way after that this actually happened. So I too have been trying to get The Rock on my podcast, not as long as you, but I've made it like a running theme of the show. I actually have a website. It's called GetTheRockOnMattsPodcast.com.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
I'm going all out.
Dude, that's another level than me.
I've got 2 tweets from The Rock.
Shut up.
I swear to God. I can show it to you.
That's amazing, dude.
Yeah, honestly,
what did he say?
2 days ago, I got a tweet from The Rock.
What?
Yeah.
What did he say?
I'm not joking. I filmed a video about it because I just lost my shit. I swear to God, it was insane. So the first time it wasn't like
it's on your screensaver, yeah.
yeah. I should actually make it my background. The first time, so it's been a running theme. I'm like, I just want to be very specific. I wanted to prove to people I kind of thought it could happen, but also at the same time, as you know, it's
never know.
You never know. It's like you're not supposed to set goals that are based upon other people saying yes or no, but at the same time, it's I was like, screw it, I'm going to go for it. Mm-hmm. So I have been taking these photos and me reading his book. He's got this book, The Rock Says. So that was the first one. It was me on Fairfax reading his book. I think I quoted him and said the inspiration I was getting from it. And he's like, oh man, thanks so much. Thanks
on
for getting...
Twitter, you just posted a photo and a quote. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, thanks for getting the inspiration from it. I really appreciate that. But I said nothing about Get the Rock on Matt's podcast. Cause also I want, and even when I replied to him, I just try to banter back and make a joke. Cause I'm I'm not going to make it be like I'm trying to get something out of him. But then this last time I actually did include the website, and oh my God, where is it? Right here. Okay. So this was the photo.
Let me see this.
You can, you can see the reply right there.
Still frame photo of The Rock on my wall. No, he hasn't returned my phone calls, but I'm not giving up. If you also want to see The Rock come on my podcast, go to Get The Rock on Matt's podcast. Dang, you got 1,600 likes. My all-time fave pick. Thanks for the love, man. And that's because you keep calling me from my payphone and collect calls. Who the fuck does that anymore? That's hilarious.
Isn't that crazy?
Did he get back to you anymore after that?
No, I replied. I said, sorry, man, cash is tight. I don't have that leather fanny pack money.
That's hilarious.
And that was it.
That's
I was
good.
I got to come back at it. I was like,
something.
Hey, I actually filmed the whole thing because I was and then I realized shit, I need to respond.
That's great.
And part of me was maybe I should just that's
funny. You know, it's interesting. It's so funny that I didn't see this. I didn't know anything about that we're both doing the same thing. One of the other person, when I started, I was like, who would be the top 3 that I'd love to get on? Obviously I Oprah and Obama and all these people would be amazing to get. But for whatever reason, the 3 names that came to mind when I first started were The Rock, Will Smith, and Jim Carrey. Those were the 3 that came to mind that I believe, because I've had a lot of celebrities that have been offered to me to interview, but I just didn't feel good about them. I didn't feel like they were doing something inspiring in the world. They were just famous for being a movie star or something. But I was like, if I don't believe in you that you're making an impact, then I don't really care as much. But I always felt like Jim Carrey just had a positive mind. He's a meditator. He thinks very differently. The Rock, I used to play football, professional football, got cut. We were both kind of from the same mindset of we weren't that good, but we worked hard, and now he's much, gone on to do incredible things, as you know. And Will Smith as well. Just the way he thinks and the way he speaks and the way he acts is really deliberate and intentional. And so I got really close to getting Jim Carrey on as well about a year ago. for a project he had. I was on the phone with his publicist. She was like, I think I can make it happen if you can fly to Montreal and I'll give you this window. And I was like, let's do it. And it fell through, but I'm not giving up. I went to Hawaii and saw his artwork in an art store, like in a whatever, you go to an art place. And his original art was on the wall that you could buy. And I was like, I'm going to buy one of his original artwork. So I bought one of his original artwork. It's actually like, there's like 50 prints of it or whatever, but he signs it and everything. It still hasn't shipped to me yet. I got it 2 months ago. But I'm going to do a whole like video and piece, like sharing it out on Twitter, because the thing he cares about the most is his art. I don't know if you're aware of this about Jim Carrey, but he loves painting. And so I'm always looking for the thing that people care about the most and speaking to their heart and adding value to that thing. So whatever it is with The Rock, we'll figure it out together.
Yeah. If either of us make it happen, then we'll have to put in a good word. But it's something beyond just trying to get a popular episode or earn more money. Like, these kind of crazy goals are, I think, in a way, just proving to ourselves and proving to other people that, like, you can just
anything's possible.
Possible. And if not many people are doing these kinds of things where you're just taking that extra crazy step to land them on your podcast.
Yeah.
And if you are able to do what others aren't, there's a shot. If it's 5%, if it's 1%, I feel like it's worth it. And it's also like, this is something I just learned from my friends have a podcast called The Daily Talk Show. And they had Hamish, who I don't know if you know Hamish Blake. He's like a really popular Australian radio guy. And they just had a conversation. They used to work with him. And they're so funny, so popular. They're like national treasures in Australia. And he was talking about how they come up with these ideas, but the ideas aren't really about the execution of what it is. It's about like the getting there, and it's actually making it fun. It's they would plan these races through Vietnam, these crazy crowded streets, and it was like they turned it into like an Indy NASCAR race, where it's like you have to complete 250 laps around this one circle. And it wasn't about completing the race. It was about like what's going to happen along the way. Are cars going to break down? Are we going to get in an accident? Are we going to get arrested? It's all that stuff along the way that makes it fun. So you haven't heard from Will Smith either, I'm guessing?
No, but I also haven't been like too aggressive on any one of them. I haven't like built websites and done all these things, but I am very persistent with people on their team of just like following up and saying, hey, like again with The Rock, I message his publicist all the time and say, I see he's got a new movie out. Can I get 20 minutes when he's doing press day? I'll like just fit me in. You know what I mean? It's just like constantly showing up and showing how serious that I am. And also saying, look, all the numbers, how much I've grown, look at my size, look at all these things. That helps as well. But I haven't made it like a life or death need, because it's not yet. And I want to make sure that it's like, authentic and genuine. But if I was given like 6 months to get The Rock on my podcast, or I was going to die, I'm sure I would like show up and just stalk him or whatever whatever it would take. Like I would do whatever it takes.
Exactly.
Or get creative, or like create a movie that's like all about how I want to get The Rock on, and like put it up on YouTube and drive 1 million views to it so he sees it or something, And
I think part of it though too is that like this for me, and I started this, like now I have like a small audience, but like when I started it, I had like 100 downloads per episode.
Yeah.
So it was just so absurd, and it was part of the idea, and it actually makes sense. Like I'm very self-deprecating, so it's like it kind of fit, because I feel like where you're at, like you're so established, it legitimately would be good press for him and a good interview to do.
I think it'd be amazing. I think it'd be, in my opinion, I think it'd be the best interview he's ever done. Now maybe that's a big claim, because I would ask him things where I could relate to him on his level, from being a former pro athlete, being broke, having your dreams shattered, and figuring out what you're going to do next. Like I can relate to that on a very personal level. I have that same experience. I don't know if Oprah has that experience, right? Of like, she didn't play football and didn't like do all these things. She had a different experience which she could relate to, but the thing that he relates to the most is like being this athlete, like this masculine guy, and he prides himself in his fitness and his football days, and he talks about it all the time. And there's not many interviewers who played pro football, except for maybe like Michael Strahan or something. But I would really want to tap into his heart and get him to share things that he's never shared, and that'd be the key.
Well, you guys, is like you said, not only just the sports and the injury, but then also like the making a change and just realizing, oh, I got to do a complete 180 here. I got to figure out what my life path is. When like you work so long and so hard for something, and then and then it's just gone.
It's like, imagine you're filmmaking for 25 years and then you weren't able to do it anymore.
Yeah, you go blind. What do you do?
You couldn't touch a camera ever again, or edit, or talk about it. You couldn't do anything. You couldn't sit in an editing bay. You couldn't storyboard. You couldn't do anything.
And so many, I think that there's probably certain skills that you learn that are universal that would probably help you, like things like consistency and putting in the work and all that. But then apart from that, like, it's going to be a grind.
I don't think The Rock would be where he's at if he didn't play sports. 100%. And I bet he would agree to that. I mean, you can tweet him that and say, would you be where you're at without playing high school, college, and professional football? I just don't think he would. Because that's where he learned how to work hard. That's where he learned how to get into into wrestling and like know what it takes to be at the top. He was around champions in college and at the pros. He was around that mindset and that mentality. And I think that's where you get your like just your chops, So
you brought up something interesting, just like from the perspective of like having a completely unique conversation with The Rock, like having a conversation that's never been had before. And I imagine in a lot of ways, that's what you try to do with every podcast. Like that's one that's very specific in nature, but like, how do you go about doing that? Because I think it is like people go on these runs of interviews, they're promoting a book and they do 100 interviews over that stint. It's like, how do you pull them out of the auto?
I ask personal questions. I ask questions pertaining to the heart. And for me, it's all in the setup as well. It's really when we sit down, I ask them a number of questions before I actually begin the podcast. I say, do you have any questions for me before we begin? And then just hear what they say. Do you have any requests? Is there anything off limits? And if they tell me what's off limits, then I say, okay, we won't go into that. But usually that's the thing we do need to go in. If they're like, I don't want to speak about this, unless it's politics, I don't care. But if they're like, well, I don't want to talk about my relationship or something in that, then I'm like, well, let's dive into that. And then I ask them, what would make this the most powerful interview you've ever done in your life, so that everyone who listens to this is completely transformed and wants to share with the world? And just that alone gets them thinking differently about, oh, this isn't just another 10-minute, like, spitting off the bullet points of my publicist, what they told me to say. This is dropping into a whole nother level to make this the most powerful interview I've ever done. And that's the key, is to get people to think that way. What will get you to open up in a way so that people are transformed when they listen, that they're moved when they listen, that they take action on what you say, and that they move forward and share it out with other people so that more people are inspired by you. My goal is to lift people up and give them that platform to share things they've never shared. And that's the key, is to really tap into the heart of what they care about the most. Not about what I care about the most. What do they care about the most? Why do they care about it? The people that have affected them the most, the lessons they've learned from the people that are closest to them. For me, that's what gets people to open up and not just be so routine in their responses.
And what's the balance between prep, right? Like, I'm sure you have either topics or certain questions you might want to ask, versus I know firsthand there's some interviews where you're like, it's just either off the rails, like it's in a great way, where you're just like free flow conversation and there's just an energy to it. And then there's also conversations that may be more challenging, that are, you have to work a little bit for, they're a little bit closed, reserved.
Yeah.
Like, how much control can you actually create when heading into an interview?
I mean, I try to do as much prep as I can. I have someone doing the research for me and telling me the main things or things that I might have missed. And for me, it's really reading energy. It's just being an open vessel to read energy, to listen, and be present. Most of the times, I think people are just reading questions off of a list as opposed to listening. I might ask one question off the list. I'll have 10, 15 questions. Maybe I'll ask one. It's really more of a place to go back to if I feel stuck, if I feel like I don't know where to take this, or there's a struggle in the interview. Or if I'm not being mindful, then maybe I'll check it and check to see like what I've missed. But I should be able to ask one question. And if I am trained enough and prepared enough, I should be able to go throughout the next hour getting everything I need to make that impact on that person and the people listening through just listening and then leaning into that response and asking a follow-up question and leaning into that response and asking a follow-up question and trying to bring it all the way back full circle so that people are impacted and inspired.
And I think that we were talking about content early on and how people are kind of desperate and really want to create a lot of content and see like a need to do that to grow their business. And then a lot of people end up creating just throwaway content that's never going to be heard. It's the Skype interviews. And
I did that the first year, I was doing that because I was on a budget and didn't have a video team and didn't have an editor and just did it all myself. And that was the way to do it. Quick, easy, throw it up. And you can kind of get away and like get some results. But I think in this time, we've really got to step it up. I mean, you've got high-end video production, quality, best cameras, lenses, and you can tell through the editing that is higher quality than a Skype screen video, no screenshot video. And I think that's going to make a lasting difference in your quality of your brand and who you are. And I realized that early on. I was doing all Skype interviews because it was just easier to save time and didn't people don't have to show up. I didn't have to travel. And then I said, you know what, if I want to really step this podcast up and be different than the other few 100,000 at the time, I've got to do it all in person. It's got to be high quality audio and I've got to get high quality video. And ever since then, it just keeps growing and growing. And the more I continue to increase the quality of my environment, my studio, the lighting and everything continues to improve, then you see, numbers are growing. People are responding differently, as opposed to just like me on my Apple iPhone headphones on Skype.
Yeah, I think you have to. That's part of the growth, right? And like learning about something new, and you have to continually be trying to improve and level up and take it one step further. And like when you look back at podcast 1 to podcast 600 or wherever you're at now, you can see that progression. And It's actually, I think it helps creators too to know that there's that process, to know that you have to get through some shit. You got to figure some stuff out, but you can't let that stop you from starting.
Yeah.
Why do you think most people don't keep up with something, right? You get the podcast number 10.
Yeah.
There's actually, I think it's podcast fatigue, they call it, where you get to if you can make it past episode 20, you're more than likely to keep going with it. Where and you see this with blogs too, where it's like, sorry, I haven't posted in a while, like people who start something and then stop. It's like, why do we stop?
I think we compare ourselves to a lot of people, and if we're not where other people are, then we get frustrated or we get, kind of burnt out that like, I'm never going to be where they're at. So we're comparing a lot. I think also we are lazy and we don't have clear vision of where we want to go. So if we don't know exactly where we want to go, we're just doing it because someone else is doing the same thing. We think we're supposed to do it. Then when it gets tough and it gets challenging, we're like, well, I don't want to do this today. Why am I doing this? And we stop. When we are clear on the vision of where we're heading, whether it be a podcast or any project, there's going to be challenges no matter what, the longer you go. And I just stay committed to my vision. And so anytime there's a challenge, it doesn't stop me. And I'm not comparing myself to all the biggest podcasts in the world and saying, I'm never going to get there, so I might as well just give up now. I'm focused on my lane and my track. And I think a lot of people are focused on what everyone else is doing as opposed to what they want to do.
Is it possible to have a clear vision for 3 years, 5 years? I remember back in college, there was advice, make a business plan. And then predictions about how much revenue you're going to make and where it's going to come from. And to me, it seems kind of crazy to think that you could predict those things without actually being in the market and actually creating stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you can predict all you want, but until you actually take action and do something, you're not going to know what the results are. My vision was based on 1 year. I'm going to do this for 1 year, every single week, once a week. And I'm going to get all like the smartest people I know to interview. And I'm going to see what happens. That was the original vision. And then year 2, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this twice a week, every single week for the year. And I'm going to continue to grow it. I'm going to start monetizing it a little bit. And I'm going to make $100,000 this year off of the podcast. Year 3 is like, I'm going to do it 3 times a week. Like it was starting to become a lot more work, but I was like, you know what? Podcasting is starting to get some notice. I'm going to go double down. because I want to really blow this thing up now. I got in early. It's starting to pay off. Now everyone's trying to get in. I'm already 200 episodes in. People are just jumping in now because they see everyone else doing it. I was like, I'm going to go all in. And the next year was like, well, I'm going to add a video. I'm going to make it better quality. And I'm going to write my first book. And I'm going to do an annual event because my community is now saying they want to meet me and everyone else. They want to meet other people like them who listen. So I was like, okay, let me just get a clear vision for that year and focus on where I want to take it this year. And that way I'm not like, okay, in 10 years, here's where it's going to be. I can think that a little bit, like where I want it to be in 10 years, where I like it to be. But things are going to change so much every month that I'm not fixated on creating that specific result in 10 years or 5 years. I'm committed to the process. I'm committed to achieving my goals, but I'm not attached to the result if it doesn't happen.
I think that's huge. And that's probably one of the reasons why I tell people, like, you have to, I'm about calculated risk. Like, I don't think that you should just leave your job before you're prepared for it. But eventually you're going to have to get to a point where you go all in. And that moment when you do go all in and when you say, that's it, I'm going to throw everything out the window and this is, I'm going for it. You got to give yourself 1, 2, or 3 years. Like pick a certain amount of years and stick to it, because it's not going to happen in the first month or the first 3 months.
I also think people don't live in enough urgency. You know, I think that's great. Is like pick a year, 2 years, 3 years and say, I'm going to give this a shot for 3 years. And if it doesn't work, I can always go back to my job making the same thing I was making. However, people don't live with enough urgency, and they don't live like it's life or death. Like I wanted to do a documentary, and I said, I could wait a few years until I'm ready, or I can just invest now, write a check, get the film crew that I want, and start the process and get it done in a year. You know, same thing with the podcast. It was like, I didn't know what I was doing. I never launched a podcast. I didn't know how to upload a thing to a blog and iTunes and all these things. I had no clue. I didn't have any recording equipment. I had my iPhone. It was the first thing that I used. And I said, I'm going to start recording and then put it up. It wasn't like, let me wait until I'm ready, until I have the equipment. You know, I started doing Skype interviews and doing screen recording. So it wasn't like I need to know all this stuff yet. I just needed to take action. And I think a lot of people aren't living in urgency, which makes me frustrated because they don't want it bad enough. They don't want to they're more afraid of failing or what people are going to think about them as opposed to living a life on their terms. And that's what frustrates me.
I think that's probably the best advice for most people. Are there people that have too much of the hustle and grind mindset? I'll sleep when I'm dead, sacrificing their health, their relationships.
I did that for years. Yeah, my early 20s, I did that because I thought I needed to. And in some ways, I probably did need to for a couple of years. But I didn't sleep much. I was eating like crap constantly. And I gained about 35, 40 pounds. People started calling me Fluis for Fat Lewis. And it started to affect me emotionally, just like never sleeping, not recovering, working constantly, chasing money or chasing results. And when I learned how to just get much smarter with my time and focus on the things that only I should be doing and delegating the rest and focusing on sleep, you know, now I go to bed by 11, I wake up at 5:30, I work out at 6. I'm focusing on my health and recovery and nutrition as a focus and priority, as opposed to a last resort, like hustle over everything. And then I know that I've taken care of myself, and throughout the day I can work really hard. But I'm always balancing with like having fun and relaxing as well. But when I'm putting in the work, I'm working really hard.
Are there times when you're, say, rushing towards a deadline, you're finishing up this film where maybe there are some sacrifices, you know, and sacrifices in terms of maybe not going out on the weekends or maybe working on the weekends?
Yeah.
Like those things happen a little bit.
I mean,
more.
I never go out. You know, for me, it's like...
You're an old man now?
I never go out. I mean, because I don't drink alcohol. So I think sacrifice... You know, I've never been drunk in my life. You know, I've had sips or whatever, but... I made it a priority early on in college. Actually, I was like, I'm never going to be the guy that goes out to bars all night long and like, just for what? To like let loose from like the day of stress. Like every single day for me is fun. There's work, there's challenges, there's things I don't want to do sometimes, but it's all working towards something that I love. And for me, 90% of it is fun. it's exciting. So I don't need to go like take a break at night and like drink and wind down. Nothing wrong with it for people, but for me, it's not what I need. I like to just go watch movies and be entertained. So I'll go do that as like my fun, or I'll go out salsa dancing or go to the beach or whatever it may be. But I don't need to be out late at night. I like to go to like book launch parties and learn from authors and, you know, inspiring events and TED Talks and stuff like that. Like that for me is exciting because I'm learning and I'm growing. And when we grow, that's when we feel fulfilled. Growth and contribution are two of the things that make us feel fulfilled as human beings. So if we're not learning, if we're not overcoming a challenge and growing, it's going to be hard because we're going to feel like we're staying the same or going down. And if we're not contributing back to others, if our work isn't helping someone else, then we're going to feel like we're not in service at all. And those two things I really try to focus on, along with my health. If you can add all three of those every single day, it's kind of hard to not enjoy your life.
When did you first start asking these questions? Because I feel like it doesn't come naturally to most people to ask questions like, what will fulfill me? Mm-hmm. How can I achieve happiness? How can I give? How can I help other people? Like most people, we kind of just get on that hamster wheel and we just start living life and climbing the corporate ladder or whatever it is, doing all these things we're supposed to do. Yeah. Was there a moment when, or not even a moment, but a time when you started to ask these difficult questions of yourself?
Yeah, when I was 4. When I was like 4 until now. Like I was always suffering as a kid, emotionally, internally. I didn't know how to handle my emotions. And I didn't know why things were happening in the world. I didn't know why kids were picking on me. I don't know why kids were making fun of me. I didn't know why, you know, I would get in trouble and get sent to the principal's office. I was like, why are these things happening? And why am I suffering so much? My entire childhood, I felt like I was suffering. And that really wanted me to ask these questions. Well, how can I not suffer? How can I feel more like my life matters? Because I think for a long time, I didn't think my life mattered. And so I wanted to know how to not feel that. And I think a lot of people are going through something or they're struggling in some area of their life and they want to know, how do I get out of this struggle? So I just want to be able to support people through my own journey as well.
Is there specific questions that you encourage people to ask themselves if they feel stuck or they feel lost?
I would say, what do you want? You know, keep it simple. What do you want and why do you want it? And if you want something only for you that isn't going to impact other people in any way at all, then I think you need to ask yourself, why do I want this thing? You know, for me, I wanted to be an All-American. I wanted to be a professional athlete to prove people wrong about me who said I couldn't do it. And yes, I loved playing sports and I wanted to do it for me as well. But I think my main intention behind it was to kind of like shove it in people's faces. And I achieved my results. I achieved my goals. And I was happy for a few minutes and then I was really angry and upset right afterwards. And so I said, you know what? I just need to go do something else and like achieve a bigger dream. And I went and did that. I started making lots of money. I started doing this. I did everything I wanted to do. And I was like, why am I still not happy? And I realized as I was asking the questions, who am I doing this for? I realized I was doing it for me to prove to other people that they were wrong about me. And that's not a good way that I've learned on how to live a fulfilling life. And so then I switched this mentality about 5 years ago where I said, you know what? I'm going to do things for me, not to prove people wrong, but because I love it and because I want to inspire other people through my journey and my process. And I want to lift other people up. And ever since then, I've had so much more clarity, focus, inner peace, more fulfillment. And that's what's been the key, is like doing it because I love something, not because I need to prove something.
I feel like there's probably a lot of people that would look at like where you're at right now. And like, obviously we talked about like the early days when things were more of a struggle and you're kind of starting over. But now people might look at your social media following. Mm-hmm. They might look at your podcast. They look at the fact that you're doing live events and you've got books and you're doing a documentary, all this stuff. And they think like, oh, I want that. Like that's something I want. Why shouldn't people want it? Like, who isn't this life for?
I think we, you know, if we want something, we can desire and want something. You know, I look at The Rock and I'm like, man, that's amazing what he's done. But I don't want to be a movie star. I want to build the impact he's built. And I want to do it through different channels, but I don't want to be like doing movies every month and doing all that. That sounds like a nightmare. I'm not an actor. I don't know, maybe in 5 years I'll do like some cameo in a movie and I'll be like, this was really cool. And if people liked it and I was good, okay. But that's not my vision. But I'm inspired by his impact, how he shows up in the world, how he communicates with people, the impact he has on people's lives. The fact that someone in Los Angeles built a website because they love him so much, they want to meet him and have him on. That's impact. And I want to have a life like that. And so I would say don't try to be like me because of all the things that I'm doing or the results that I'm getting with like books and events and stuff, unless that's what you really want to do. But you can be inspired by my journey and say, you know what, I want to be the best gymnast in high school and impact people the way Lewis is or whatever it may be, or the way The Rock is. But don't say, I want to be a movie star so I can impact people like that, or I want to write books because of that. You got to figure out your angle and your thing. And this is just my thing.
There's a lot of people that have tremendous amounts of success, that are famous, that have large followings, whatever it may be, and we know that they aren't happy.
Yeah. Jim Carrey says that I wish like everyone became rich and famous and they realize that's not the key to happiness. Something like that quote. And, you know, maybe there are some people who are rich and famous who are really happy, but I don't know if it's because they get stalkers walking down the street, like screaming at them. I don't know if that brings them joy, but maybe because they're doing meaningful work, they have great relationships, they don't hold grudges, or they're not resenting people. They feel like their work matters. That's the things that's probably making them more joyful and more happy. Not because they have tons of money. Money creates a lot of problems too if you're not ready for it and you don't know how to manage it. Money creates a lot of stress. There's a lot of people with handouts saying, give me this, give me that. Oprah talked about this once on a podcast where, because she didn't come from this rich family or wealthy family, but as she started to gain a lot of wealth, everyone wanted a handout and expected her to give them money constantly, to the point where she says that she, stopped talking to siblings. I think it was a sister of hers, so she didn't talk to her for a long time. Third cousins are saying, you owe me, I don't owe you anything, right? And she talked about in this episode how she decided after years of this happening that she was just going to throw one big dinner celebration. And she invited everyone, like all of her family, all the people close to her, invited everyone, and was giving away gifts to everyone, giving away cash to some people. I think she bought cars for some people, different extravagant gifts, and said, I welcome you all here. I'm going to throw you the best party ever, the best meal, and I'm going to give you guys some great gifts. And at the end of it, she said, never ask for anything again from me. I'm going to give you what I want to give you because I want to do it. Not because you ask, but because I want to. But never ask again. Maybe I'll give you some because I feel like I want to, but don't ask me ever again. Something like this in the effect. And she said that people still were ungrateful. They were like, how come you gave them $3,000 and me $1,000, whatever it may be. And it's like, you're never going to please everyone on your rise. And so there's other stresses that come from that. People look at you differently and they want certain things as opposed to your friendship. And that's not fun either. So.
Yeah, having no money, what Kanye West said is having money is not everything, not having it is. So
yeah,
when you don't have money, it's the most important thing in your life. It's the only thing you think about.
It's like health though. When you don't have health, you'll give up all your money in the world for that. Look at Steve Jobs. He talked about that before he passed away. He was like, I would give up everything to have another week of health with my family and my friends, a year, or whatever it may be. When you're about to die, you will give up everything. None of it matters. Now, when you're broke, you still feel like you're going to die sometimes. If you can't pay the bills, if you don't have anywhere to stay, it's like the second most powerful thing, right, besides your health. And it's tough, man. I remember was broke for a few years, and it is like the feeling like you don't matter, you're worthless, you're going to die. Like it has that feeling to it as well. I don't know if you've ever had that. Probably every filmmaker has, struggling filmmakers in the beginning, right? And it's the worst feeling in the world. And you don't know how am I going to make money? How am I going to do this? And until you're able to break through, then you realize it's a lot easier. But when you don't know how to do it, it's like suffocating, scary.
In terms of running a business, making money, like building up a company, I guess there's probably two ways to go about it, like move fast and break things and take your time and go really slow. Where do you see yourself on that side of things?
Move fast and break things.
Yeah, it sounded like that from the
I try
urgency.
not to break things, but I try to move fast and put out something really good to start and then make it great as we go. Because most people try to make it great right away, and it takes them 6 months to a year to launch something because they're still fixated on the logo or the intro video to something or whatever it may be. The video has got to be perfect. But really, you got to just give people results. If you're a business and you've got a product or a service, the key is to get someone a result that's going to make their life easier, something faster for them, or give them some type of value or entertainment. And that's the key. Is I just try to always give as much value as possible, as quickly as possible, to see if people actually want it. Then if they do, let me make it better and improve it. The version 2.0. So that's the key for me, is not think about it too much.
Just
do it, see if people are going to pay for it, then make it better.
Yeah, it seems like not afraid to make mistakes. But even at your current level where you have if you make a mistake and you release something that maybe isn't ready, then there's a lot more friction than if somebody's got a small business putting something out there.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the key is to, if something that I want to launch that is paid, I would usually have people pay me up front and then give it to them later. So only those people see it who paid for it. And if no one buys it, then I don't have to create it. So for me, it's like I do a Kickstarter pretty much on everything I do without using the platform Kickstarter. I just say, hey guys, I'm thinking of launching this. Here's a place where you can pay me if you want it. I'll get it to you in a few weeks. If no one pays, then I don't have to. It's not a good idea, or I didn't present it in a way that was polished enough, I guess. But usually people pay it, and then I'll give them version 1. Say, let me know what you think. How can I make it better? And then I update it, and then I bring it out to the masses. That's kind of how I do it.
I love that. How do you say if only 2 or 3 people, I'm sure it doesn't happen now, but say early on, 2 or 3 people respond, or at least you can tell that it's not worth it to create this product?
I just refund their money.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would just be or I'd say, hey, I'll do a coaching session with you or something else, be trade for the money that was exchanged.
And it's I guess it's just an assurance on your time.
Yeah,
because we put so much time into making things.
Imagine you made a movie that no one watched and you spent a year of your life thinking that it was the greatest thing ever. Maybe you do it because you're a crazy filmmaker and you're it's about the art and all these things. But if it's your livelihood and you got to make money as well, I just feel like it's better to test something and see that people really want it, or to get on it, even just to get on an email wait list. Hey, I'm going to launch this thing. Sign up on my newsletter if you're interested in getting notified. If no one even opts in, it's going to be hard to get them. If they can't put in their email, why would they get out their credit card and buy something? Whether it's a $5 video or a movie, why would they pay for that if they won't even opt in because they're curious? So it's you can start there with an opt-in, or follow me if you're interested, whatever it may be.
What has been, from your perspective, the biggest motivator for somebody to want to purchase a product where that's a huge step, I think, for any relationship with an audience. Mm-hmm. Just because you have an audience doesn't mean that they're going to buy your shit or they're going to pay for one of your products. So it's a
lot of people with big followings who are broke.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And people have this expectation or this idea that they're all loaded or rolling in it.
Yeah, they're not.
But you seem like somebody who's put just as much effort, if not more effort, into the products you create, the monetizing and the looking at it as a business. And I talk about this with YouTubers, because there's so many YouTubers that's all they have is just a YouTube channel, and they rely solely on all of their income on ads and just the monetization button, which could be turned off by YouTube at any time. And it's you got to see yourself as an entrepreneur, as a business person. How can I expand this and use YouTube beyond, use my audience beyond just YouTube? So which ways have you seen monetization being the easiest or the least friction for your audience?
It's finding the biggest pain. So I survey my audience all the time and say, what's the thing you're struggling with the most right now? And then I give, 10 different options based on what I think they're going to be struggling with. Here's 10 things. Just click on the one that you're struggling with the most. And if they're I'm struggling with figuring out my goals and my vision. Okay, well, let me create a program, a book, a course, an event, coaching, something, a system around that. If they're like, I can't get any sales, no one follows me. Okay, let's create a program on how to build an audience so people follow you. What are those steps that you need to do? So it's just speaking exactly into the pain that people are facing the most and solving someone's problem. That's what it is. It's solving problems.
I feel like a lot of this stuff isn't exactly intuitive, because our intuition would be, I'll make something then sell it, or I know best, I'm the business owner,
or just here's what I want to do because it's cool to me. No, it's not cool if no one's going to buy it. And so you got to think about what serves your artistic viewpoint but also serves the audience. And that's what I think about. Like, there's a lot of things I could be selling to my audience that can make me a ton of money. I could sell sneakers or hats or like phone cases. I could sell lots of different stuff. But if I'm not interested in it as well, then it's not going to do well. But when I'm curious and creative and artistic and excited about something, and my audience, it serves a pain in my audience, then that's the sweet spot, is bringing my love for something and serving the pain of my audience and bringing it together. That's where the magic happens.
It's kind of like finding that sweet spot. Because I know that as a creative and a filmmaker, I sometimes want to create the thing just because I think it would be cool. And like sometimes I think you can do that, but you just have to know
you may not make money.
You're probably not going to make money.
And that's part of your portfolio piece that you show people is like, here's something I can do and here's something I'm passionate about. Cool. But if no one else is interested, then you're just serving an audience of one.
Great. Let's do a couple Instagram questions. I've got questions from Instagram and then we'll wrap up the podcast. Let me see. I've actually got a video here.
Hi, Matt. First of all, thanks for answering my question on the podcast. My name's Courtney Stevens. I'm the owner and founder of Minimal Living Limited here in the UK. The one thing that I've struggled with over the last year of taking up minimalism is really this idea of masculinity. I grew up in a very masculine part of the UK. The one thing I'd ask is, have you guys ever felt like you've struggled to find male friends based on this? If you don't fit into a particular category, where you don't want to, go to the pub and drink alcohol and watch the football, have you ever found it hard to meet friends based on that?
You wrote the book on the mask of masculinity, so I feel like this question is perfect for you.
Yeah, I've never struggled with like finding male friends. I've always been very outgoing, and I'm also, I don't know, I just feel like I'm very friendly, and I do a lot of different hobbies, and I meet people when I'm doing those hobbies, whether it's sports or salsa dancing or podcasting. It's like I'm meeting male friends all the time. So I've never struggled with that. My advice would be to do the things you love and find other people that do the things who love the same thing. And in that process, you have something where you can talk about and connect on. But really, I think to build a relationship with another man, you've got to be willing to put yourself out there first. You don't have to be like crying in this vulnerable person in front of them, but you can start to just talk about things like saying, you know what, man, I'm just really going through like a struggle in my relationship right now. Have you ever felt like you've been struggling in a relationship before? And how'd you get through it? It doesn't have to be like this deep, dark conversation, but it can just be like, man, like, have you ever struggled with your parents? Like, gosh, my parents are just constantly on top of me and constantly doing this. And it's just like, I don't know what to tell them because I care about them. Obviously, they're my parents and I want to be there for them. But how do you navigate that? What have you done? It's just like getting guys to open up a little bit and have these type of conversations. I believe we'll start to build a bond with other men that'll be great friends.
I think it's like what we're looking for too is depth, and not everybody is either willing or capable of having a depthful conversation.
Yeah.
And like I noticed that with some of my friends, and that's like fine. I have many friends who they're just really great buddies. They're always going to be some of my best friends, but we're never going to talk about, our childhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's fine.
And I think also he was like, I don't want to be at a pub or a sports game. It's kind of hard to find friends like that and have those conversations at the pub or a sports game or whatever when someone's having a beer. I think it's like getting in different settings, getting outside, like, playing, being in the park or whatever it may be, or just, again, doing your hobbies, doing the things that you love, not just being in a bar.
Right. Like following your interests. And then if there's other people that are interested in it.
If you're like a surfer, go surfing with a buddy. And then like when you're walking back from the beach, have the conversation as you're putting like your surfboard up in your cars, whatever it may be.
Right. I got a question here from Lionel Johnson, 22-year-old artist from Chicago. I just graduated from the American Academy of Art in Chicago and got my Bachelor of Fine Arts in Illustration. I was recently offered a job as an art teacher in San Francisco, but due to finance issues, $65,000 in student loan debt, I had to turn down the job. At what point do you think it's necessary to take huge risks to further your path?
So he has $65,000 in student loan, and he got a job offer for what?
He didn't say what the job offer was, but I'm imagining
not enough
to make that leap and that move. So if you're kind of stuck with debt, how can you take risks?
Yeah, I think you get to be creative. Maybe you need to find a job right now that can pay off that debt where you can also provide for yourself, or you go back and live at home if that's an option for 2 years and say, okay, I'm going to save money and this is how much I need to save every single month so that in 2 years I can go out and do my own thing. Or you go get the job that is a good job. Maybe it's not what you really want, but it pays what you need. And you commit to yourself that on the weekends I'm doing murals and getting paid a side gigs doing murals or fine art for clients, and I'm building up my brand as an artist from Instagram and starting to get other paid gigs so that in 2 years I can replace my income and go freelance on my own. I think it's not just taking a risk and not having a plan, it's being strategic about it. And also knowing that, for a couple of years I was on my sister's couch and I couldn't just leave because I didn't have any money. So I wasn't like, well, I'm just going to go take a risk and like move to New York City and I have this debt, I've got no money, I've got no job, I'm going to figure it out. That wouldn't have been a smart risk. But it was, okay, I'm going to make $500 a month, and then $1,000 a month, and then $2,000. And I built up to my goals. And when I had enough, then it was just a clear path, like, let me move to New York City and chase my dream. And that's what I did.
Yeah, I think a big thing that he should be focusing on right now is getting out of debt and trying to figure out a way to get out of debt. I graduated college with $97,000 in student loans.
Sucks.
And then I bought a brand new car.
It's not smart.
Which is, but that was my mindset at the time. I wasn't taking responsibility. I wasn't willing to look and identify the problem. And once I started to look in and started getting into like self-help books, like I'd certainly recommend Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover.
He's great.
It's a fantastic book. And for me, it got me to identify the problem and start to realize what kind of freedom I would have if I wasn't in debt. And if he didn't have the debt, obviously he could, maybe he wouldn't have gotten the job offer because he wouldn't have had the job,
right.
But he would have been able to make that leap. So once he's able to get out of debt, I don't think he has to stay at home with his parents for 5 years or 6 years. But once you start to chip away, you build up a little bit of a savings, which is what I did. I probably paid off like half of my student loans living at home with my parents. Then I was like, saved up a security, a nice little safety stash of money in case things took a turn for the worse living in New York. And then I continued to pay down my debt and then eventually became debt free. And it's like, honestly, there's like a feeling there. Like certainly when you pay off that last loan where you're like,
it feels amazing.
I now am free to do what I want. I can move across the country. It's just, there's so much more that's open to you, and you can actually take more risks once you're in that position. When you have to be conservative first. And then once you're at that place, then you can start to take those risks and take the leaps and, take that crazy job offer across the country.
That's it.
A couple more here. Pedro Hernandez, for a beginner in any business, what specific training did you do that you found the most helpful in regards to personal development? I'm thinking about hiring a coach to help change my mindset from an employee to a business owner.
Being a business owner is really hard. And I don't think everyone's cut out for it. I think you've got to really want it and be committed to it, because I don't know the statistic, but it's something like 80% of businesses fail within the first 3 years. So if you're willing to go into something and know that you have whatever the percentage is, a high percentage chance of not succeeding within the first 3 years and it not working, and you need to change your vision and evolve and adapt and innovate, then it may not be for you. maybe you want to be on a team with a big brand who's got a lot of resources that can help you continue to grow in that context. So I think it's like just getting clear, again, not doing something because everyone else is doing it or talking about it or it seems cool, but doing it because you really want to do it. That's number one. I would say the number one skill that has helped me is understanding how to generate sales. Sales is the bloodline of a business. And if you don't know how to ask for money or how to generate a sale, then you don't have a business. You just have an idea or a hobby or whatever it may be. So learning how to sell is one of the greatest skills. And through the art of learning how to sell, you've got to learn about understanding people. And so really it comes down to communication and enrollment. You being a person that people want to be around. You being a person that people feel like you care about. You being someone that understands how to listen to what people are really saying and then give them the solution to their biggest pain. That's been the key for me, is learning how to sell.
You can also have different personality types, right? In a leadership role, in a business role, not everybody has the same exact style. And I think sometimes we think of this picture in our mind, say of a creative as somebody that's just like, they're in a room just scattered with papers and they're a genius and they have to make these lone rogue decisions, or like the leader that's super confident, inspiring. Actually, I think of Silicon Valley, who like the lead dude is just, he gets in front of his
throws up.
He throws up everywhere. And it's like, that's probably what I would do in that situation. And it's like, not all great leaders are the same. They don't have the same kind of charisma or style or presence. And I think that's something that's comforting. But like you said, you still got to be able to figure out a way to monetize and make money and make a living.
And money doesn't solve every problem in a business, but it solves lots of problems. Without the money, you can't pay your team, you can't pay yourself, you can't pay the rent, you can't pay the things that you have to pay for. And again, it doesn't solve everything, but it helps build and grow and solve a lot of things. So you've got to be able to generate cash.
If somebody's right now facing doubt, like they don't know what to do, how to push through it, they're just they want to put something out into the world, but they're faced with all these kind of ideas about how they're not good enough, or people are going to hate it, or they're going to say it's shitty. What advice would you give them?
People are already making fun of you by doing nothing. They're going to make fun of you no matter how great it is, the thing you do. There were people that watched your documentary that said this thing sucks, it's freaking slow, it's dry, it's whatever it is. And then there's the other amount of people who are like, this is exactly what I needed right now. I think the key is to focus not on the people who leave the negative reviews, which is the hardest thing to do because you fixate on those, but to focus on the people you want to support and serve, that audience, that community, those individuals that need this the most. And you give your best. You learn, you're going to fail. It's not going to be the best it can be, and you can get better. And you grow into the next thing, and don't rely on one piece of work to be your entire life. It's the body of work. It's you putting out one song that does not represent who you are as an artist. It's the collection of songs, over 50 songs that you're writing. Same thing as a filmmaker. One video doesn't define you. It's your body of work. But some videos can define you as well if they really stand out.
I think that's a great place to wrap up. If people want to see what you're up to now, where should we send them?
Yeah, Lewis Howes on Instagram or lewishowes.com or School of Greatness Podcast.
Cool. Thanks for doing this, man.
Thanks, bro.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of The Ground Up Show. Don't forget to submit your jingle to the Get the Rock on Matt's podcast jingle competition. Trademark, all rights reserved, patent pending. You can send your 5 to 7 second jingle to hello@mattdiavella.com, and I'm going to bring all these together. I'm going to make a YouTube video out of it. I'm going to go through all the entries, and I'm going to pick the one that I think fits best for the show, the one that makes me giggle the loudest. You will be announced as the winner of the one, the only, the Get the Rock on Matt's podcast jingle competition. Trademark, all rights reserved, patent pending. Again, send in your jingle to hello@mattdiavella.com, and I can't wait to hear from you. Thanks for watching.